All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I just wanted to quickly introduce our event today. Thank everybody for coming, and thank Professor Richard Jochum and the great panel of arts educators that we have today for doing this presentation. And with that, I'll pass it over to Professor Richard Jochum. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe, for the intro and for your support. Thank you to CPS and Amy Diner for inviting us today. And thank you all for all of you who are on the other side, the attendees, for being with us. And I want to welcome the panelists, Chloe Irla, Alexandra Jagiello, Zhenzhen Qi, to the panel, which will be focused on a collaborative making session. But before we get to this, I want to give a little bit of context. Context for this session has a lot to do with the 3-week symposium that we had just launched earlier today on art school pedagogy. We call it Art School Pedagogy 2.0. And the reason we call it Art School Pedagogy 2.0 has much to do with the global pandemic that forced us to move our teaching online. That seemed particularly difficult for studio art teachers because of the materials we use and the methods. So a year ago, we thought that'd be entirely impossible. But now, 1 year later, we realized that we managed okay. And so it's that's part of the symposium. And as part of the symposium, we have Chloe with us and Alex, who submitted proposals. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to kind of bring them into this forum of thinking about how it has changed our teaching and how they responded, how we responded to it. And I want to get us started by asking each of the panelists how they dealt with this pivot from teaching studio in person to teaching studio online. Before I do that, I want to give you an idea of what else you can expect after giving each panelist time to share how they responded to the pandemic or share their work, some thoughts on that. We will have Zhenzhen guide us through a collaborative making session, some really exciting kind of collaborative lessons that I think are fun to do and to engage with. For this session, we will use Miro. Miro is a live collaboration tool that, thanks to the pandemic, has entered the classrooms across the country. It's essentially a digital whiteboard, and we will show you a slice of it as part of the session. So now let me go and ask Chloe, who is a professor for art and art history and teaches studio. Chloe, how have you responded to this pandemic?
Hi, Richard. Thank you. Well, I have to say that, when all of this was happening, last year, I was very grateful that I had already taken an 8-month-long intensive class about how to teach hybrid and blended learning and online teaching. I had already taken that class. So when everything hit a year ago, and I immediately hit the ground running over spring break and was thinking about, okay, what did I have planned for my classes for the remainder of the semester, and how could I shift? What digital tools could I use to make up for the mural project that my one class was supposed to be doing, and have them do something else instead? So it made me very thankful for that already established relationship with instructional design staff at my institution at McDaniel College. And that's something that I would encourage to any instructor, is to maintain a great relationship with those staff members who are able to support your teaching.
And maybe I can loop in Alex. Alex, you are a student in instructional technology, and you have your own. You found your own way to respond to this pandemic. Maybe can you just say a few words about that before you then, in the next round, talk a little more about your project?
Definitely. Thank you so much, Richard. Yeah, so I would say that my immediate reaction to the pandemic and to figuring out ways to be creative while at a distance from other people, it kind of took me into down this path to really figure out what my interests are and what my skills are. And I realized that, you know, I'm a creative person and I have a lot of friends that also like to express themselves creatively. So we were trying to, you know, figure out what could be a potential solution to this problem. So after a few conversations with friends, and we had talked about, you know, oh, I'm making this art over here, like take a look at it over FaceTime and stuff like that. I was like, you know what, why don't we just mail each other something that we're making? And then I kind of had that aha moment where I was like many of us, we are feeling isolated during the pandemic. So this idea of sharing art and connecting across mediums, distances, and cultures can be applied on a larger scale. So I created a program called the Art Exchange, which I will get into in a little bit.
Wonderful, thank you. I would like to bring back Chloe and ask you, I know that Alex is an instructional technologist, and you have a great interest in that. So maybe talk a little bit about what interests you in it, and what are some of the tools that you came up with, or that you found helpful, and that you want to bring to our attention?
Sure. Yeah. When I was first learning about instructional design, it felt very intuitive and natural to me. I'm a very organized person and have used a backwards design method in designing my courses in terms of, okay, what are the outcomes and the objectives, and what tools can I use to get students the content that they need? So in many ways, especially when adapting to an online environment, it's not reinventing the wheel in terms of coming up with totally new assignments that would have taken place in a solely face-to-face environment, but it's how can those assignments be adapted to a more collaborative online or hybrid learning space. So I can share, do you want me to share my screen for those slides now?
That would be great.
Okay, sure. And I'm going to put in the chat some links to that I've included in the presentation so that any attendees can click on them and see what I'm talking about. Okay, there's my screen, and I'm going to hit present. You all can see that. Okay, so I have to say too that I'm very grateful for my institution in that they allowed us instructors a choice in terms of the modality of how we would teach our courses this year. So in my case, I adapted an online asynchronous modality for all of my classes due to having a 6-year-old at home who's doing virtual kindergarten at the same time. And I knew that even having a fully online class that involved face-to-face meetings was not going to be a viable option for me. So adapting to that and really planning over the summer and doing research and collaboration with our instructional design team was really critical to getting my classes up and running for the fall. So the collaborative tools that I'm going to introduce to you all are called Padlet, Wakelet, and Flipgrid. And one thing I want to mention right off the bat is that I had access to these tools for free through my institution, and thus all of my students did too. So it wasn't like they were having to purchase a subscription or, purchase anything. Their Microsoft 365 credentials gave them that access. And that was really important to me too. I'm not an instructor that assigns a $100, $200 textbook for each course. I want to keep things accessible for everyone. So this first tool called Padlet is very similar to a whiteboard. I almost think of it as like an in real life cork board where you can kind of pin things and group things together. It's very image forward, so puts an emphasis on visuals, but you can also add comments and captions to them. It creates these collaborative collections. So in one class that I'm teaching this semester, for each week, we use a different Padlet for students to post inspirational images related to the content that we're covering. So it's a great way for students to see what each other is looking at. It's very intuitive. It's a drag and drop approach. And in that way, I think it is, accessible for many different age groups. The kind of technical competency is not huge for using Padlet. There's potential for brainstorming, thinking of it as this sort of mind mapping potential. And it's a way for me to assess engagement as well. So, for example, in one of the classes that I teach, which is a first year seminar that I taught in the fall called Art on the Edge, within my Blackboard course, which I posted a screenshot here, I post a to-do list, and one of the first to do is post a selfie to this Padlet, and that was the image in the previous screen. So it lets me know if students are reading the critical information in Blackboard when they need to read it. And it's a great way for them to kind of meet each other since we were fully online last semester. And then this is an example from a design class that I'm teaching currently, where students have just used their phones, taken a picture within their sketchbook and posted their sketches on this board. And then the great thing about Padlet too is you can kind of click and drag images together and group them. So, these are working really well, or these are related to some other content. It's really great for that type of brainstorming. And then the second tool that I've utilized is called Wakelet, which is embedded within the Microsoft 365 suite. It's also very image forward, but also students are able to post videos, links, sound files. It's great for compiling collaborative and individual portfolios. And the two links that I've posted give you an example of each of those. So when a class turns in a project, they also have to post a screenshot to the Wakelet so they can see everyone else's work. It's very intuitive to use. Again, just kind of clicking add new content. And for me, it was way more aesthetically pleasing than just using Blackboard's discussion board. That's what McDaniel is using as their learning management system. So it looks better. And it's a great way too for students to curate their own portfolios. And again, I could even see high school students using this as a way to post all of the work that they have completed in a year and then use that to apply to other schools or whatever. And one of the features that I love about Wakelet is it's very easy to export each collection as a PDF. So in that way, I'm able to very easily save my students' work and have a record of it, and really makes my workflow very efficient. And then the last tool that I'm going to mention is called Flipgrid, which creates this capsule collection of presentations. And it's great for a variety of presentation types. So one of the classes that I teach is a kind of like career prep class called My Career. And students, they have to post an elevator pitch about themselves. It's a little limiting in terms of the browser that it prefers users to use. It's not very mobile friendly if a student is trying to access it just on their phone. It does have fun filters and effects which kind of lighten the mood in terms of what students are posting about. There's no need to upload files. They basically click a button and it starts recording. And it's a great way to assess articulation of content coming from a student in a different way. So rather than students writing about this is what I did and why I did it, they can actually record a video of themselves talking about that same content. I found that students do watch each other's presentations, which didn't surprise me too much because I think our students over the last year have really just been longing for community and each other. So I've been pleased to see that students have been watching. The views have been up. It can also be integrated into a digital tool called Hypothesis. So students can, if everyone in a class is reading a chapter, students can use Flipgrid to record a response based on that particular reading in a really interesting integrated way. And the student example that I've given you a link of is a student presenting their work, which is a drawing identity related project. So my takeaways from utilizing these tools are that really they just added these additional skills in my toolkit that could be used in any modality, especially at my institution. Our contact hours are 3 hours a week. So that in-class time is so critical and limited that learning these tools and how students share their work has really made me assess how my contact hours are used in face-to-face classes when we might not have enough time to get through a critique in one class period. I think Flipgrid especially gives a really accessible alternative for students, especially I've had many students with mental health issues who just, when they have to do a presentation in class, they just don't show up. But what if they can then record it themselves and then turn it in on Flipgrid? That might be a good way to kind of ease into that requirement as a college student. And I think too, trusting that students will adapt and embrace these online tools and acknowledging their technological competency is something that I've learned as well. And I've learned this partly from my daughter, who's 6 years old and is now able to navigate her learning management system as a kindergartner, has really given me a lot of faith and confidence in my future students, in that we really, they are able to do so much, and we just have to give them the tools to be able to do so. So, and I'm thankful to my institution for the flexibility that they offered me to be able to teach from home during the pandemic. So those are my 3 tools.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really interesting. Especially also what you say about the how they reflect or how they give you additional skills in your toolbox. We have a lot of discussion at Teachers College about the relationship between technology and pedagogy. So the discussion reflects at its heart a concern that technology needs to be tied to pedagogy, right? So it doesn't carry us away. And that means the technology needs, and also these tools and platforms, right? They need to make sense to us as teachers in our teaching practice and with our limited time. And they need to make sense to where we are, right? And not everything works for everybody in the same way. So, and I think when you say additional skills in my toolkit, it also means in your toolkit, right? And it may not work for everybody, but I think that's very important to acknowledge. It's not we need to learn this particular tool, but it may offer us something that we really that really adds something and expands our pedagogical voice or our teaching. So, and thank you for sharing these tools. I would love to move on to Alex, and I find it quite interesting. Her project is very different. It's not so much within digital tools rather than within exchange. So there's an element of collaboration, which also I see in Chloe's tools, so to speak, or platforms. But Alex, your approach to it with the art exchange program, that's very much based on a not only digital kind of a collaboration.
Yeah, I wanted to just highlight something that Chloe said, which I think will lead kind of well into my presentation, but about not reinventing the wheel. And I think that that is a place where a lot of teachers struggle right now, specifically with the emergence of digital learning coming on so quickly. There is a lot of pressure, but I kind of just want to tell all of the teachers out there that don't forget the stuff that you did before. That is still just as important. And you can even integrate previous lesson plans, like just while speaking, you can have students write a worksheet or create something like at home and then like show each other like over the computer and utilize the technology in that way so that they have time to make outside of screen time or like, while on the screen. In addition to, digital learning platforms and things like that. But on that note, I'm going to share my screen. All right. So again, I'm Alex. I'm in the Instructional Technology and Media program at Teachers College, and I am a master's candidate. So I have a lot of interest in expressing myself, and I think that's where this art exchange really flourishes because it is specifically designed for the individual. Each month, also these are some collages that I made. All of my collages incorporate themes of community, mantras that are important to me, obviously important events. I like to use upcycled materials, and I like to use materials that friends have given me. Okay, so the art exchange is currently nonprofit status is pending, but it is an opportunity for virtually anyone of all, of all age groups, demographics, social, economic statuses to participate in a creative outlet. As you'll see in the next slides that I present, a lot of people participate in the art exchange for a lot of different reasons. But let me just give you the facts so that you understand really the structure of the art exchange and how you could potentially apply something similar into your classroom. So every month there's a Google form that I send out to people that have participated in the past. Just contacts, put it on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of those things. I have a website. And this Google form collects the interests, a short introduction, and hobbies that the participant is interested in. Once I have all of the participants that I can take on for that month, or the date is up, usually I take until about the last of the month to collect the information. And then I spend about a day or two matching up people based upon proximity, based upon their interests or their hobbies, based upon their skill level. So these are all designed to be specific to the individual and give them those options. So it works once a month. You get your participant match at the beginning of the month. You will receive a Google Doc where I have basically transferred the information so that both parties are able to see each other's contact information and such. And from that point on, I kind of just like say, all right, now it's up to you guys to decide how engaged you want to be with one another. So I have had participants in the past send each other emails right away. Actually, this past month, a participant, my match, had decided he wanted to speak to me on the phone right away. And so I thought that was awesome. And so we had a 20, 30-minute conversation just talking about art, talking about our interests. And then, of course, using that as fuel to create the project for your partner, which is really helpful when making something for someone that you don't necessarily know. So again, you match the partners at the beginning of the month, exchange interests and information, and then by the end of the month, I will mail my art project to my partner, and my partner will mail their art project to me. As you can see here, I like to encourage the use of upcycled materials again, and just trying to be as sustainable and resourceful with the supplies that I use. These are just a few examples of previous art exchange projects. And I'm going to just move quickly through this, but if you're interested, you can take a look on the Art Exchange website. So as I said before, there are a lot of motivations for people to participate, and this is just taken from a participation feedback form that I did recently. And if you wanted to just take a look through this, you can see, some people participate so that they have accountability to actually allocate time for being creative, which is interesting to me. And I think that's a very valid point, because sometimes art can get pushed to the side when we have a lot of other responsibilities piling up. But this has been an outlet for people to secure that time and know that, hey, I have to make an art project for my partner, so I need to designate time every month to be creative, which I really love. People are interested in connecting. As you can see, you can read this as well. So just another piece of data from the feedback form. I asked participants, did you enjoy making what you exchanged? And this was actually before I added a few of the more personal touches, such as interests, hobbies, things like that. So partners were kind of going into it more, they were kind of blindly matched. So of course, getting the feedback from the participants has been really helpful in improving the process. And it kind of engages and touches upon that student to teacher relationship. But in this case, I like to think of it as the student and the teacher are constantly learning from each other. And this is an example of that. So just kind of skewing off of the art exchange and into more applicable or practical techniques for teachers, I like to design my programs with cognitive learning theories kind of as the foundation. And the art exchange highlights both connected learning and constructionism. So constructionism is the act of making, and through the act of making, you are learning. And then, of course, through connected learning, you are learning through social interaction. So those are both really important things that I like to highlight. I know I'm kind of tight on time, but I'm going to keep going. So in terms of thinking about how you can apply this, I would say try to think about how the curriculums and the lessons can be individualized and self-reflective. So as I just mentioned about that student to teacher learning opportunity with the feedback form, you can implement something called a third space, which is relatively new, but there's some research on it which you can look into. But essentially, it's an opportunity. You can implement it at the beginning of the class, the end of the class, however you feel is most appropriate. But it's a time that's unstructured. So it's unstructured time for the students to be able to voice their opinions, voice their concerns, talk about experiences. And then the teacher can learn from the students and learn gradually over time, okay, so now this is what this student is interested in. How can I incorporate that into the lesson? Oh, this student just mentioned this topic. How can I take what they just said and tie it into the lesson that we just did? Things like that. In one of my projects, I keep preaching self-reflect. Oh, self-reflection, this was a project that I did recently, which is an identity book, which was a really fun way for me to like work through some of my own things, and then as well, you know, have some creative expression. And also just emphasizing real quick before I move on to my last slide, all of our students have different learning styles. So the more that you can experiment and allow students the opportunities to explore materials and explore conversations with each other in an unstructured way, you will start to see really great benefits from engagement and productivity and motivation and things like that. So yeah, I just wanted to show, you know, like here, for example, is my identity book. What I would have people do potentially is, you know, in a studio time over Zoom scenario, you could have your students' cameras on, muted, and you can be working on an assignment like together, but, you know, just being able to see each other over Zoom. And of course, then have opportunity for discussion. So finally, I just want to say thank you again for this opportunity to share the art exchange and some insight into these techniques that I've come across. But if you are interested in learning more about the art exchange, you can go to the artexchange.us. I also obviously have email, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to talk to anyone further about this. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alex, for introducing that project and your approach toward the pandemic and how to collaborate in this difficult time, in this disruptive time. I would now welcome Zhenzhen Qi as is a doctoral student in our program, Art and Art Education, and also an instructor in our program. We have worked a lot on creative technologies, programming together. Zhenzhen will talk a little bit about her work and then guide us into the making session and with Miro, and introduce the platform for that as well.
And thanks so much to Professor Jochum, Chloe, and Alex for the thoughtful notes on using emerging software platforms to design equitable shared online classrooms. Following the three of their notes, I would like all of our invite all of our participants today to kind of step back a little bit and then kind of consider the overall picture about the current digital learning culture at large. COVID has taken our reliance on software to the next level. We now rely on software for managing our days from the moment we wake up until we go to sleep. Yet the design process of a lot of these platforms and software such as search engine, video games we play, social media apps we rely on, the creative making process and designing and shaping and developing these platforms are exclusively available for a very small group of designers and developers in the tech industry. As a result of that, young learners and even educators ourselves are increasingly being passive consumers of digital culture, even sometimes targets of increasingly automated performance evaluation AI algorithms. So the question I consider in relationship to collaborative making is that how can we inspire the young learners to think critically and creatively about today's digital culture? Very briefly, I want to take all of us back to a historical period in the 1920s, in the Surrealist movement, whereby a group of artists devised kind of like a collaborative drawing game or like a drawing system per se, whereby each individual drawers would draw a portion of the artwork and folds up their drawing and leave like a little bit of sneak peek at the end and pass it on to the next drawer. So this kind of collaborative drawing system or drawing game generated a series of surrealist painting, the content, the composition, the narrative of which was wildly creative, going way above and beyond the imagination of any single individual. So I have been kind of reflecting on this historical period in art and art making and art participatory art education model, and thinking about with the availability of emerging collaborative learning platforms, how can we essentially revitalize that kind of collectivism spirit to allow us to honor and support and cherish each other's voices and creative voices and expression. So yeah, in order, digital and software culture today have a lot of kind of bias and a lot of like hidden software effects that make us sometimes feel narrow and powerless. In order to eliminate these kind of feelings and effect that only reflect a single author, a single design, a single culture, we need to think about systems and processes that allow multiple perspectives through collectivity. And with that said, if you would like to participate in the following interactive session on one of the platforms that Chloe and Alex touched upon called Miro, I would like to invite everyone to go to miromiro.com to start registering for an account. And in the same time, I'm gonna very briefly go over a few quick examples. Yeah, so so maybe everyone can get started going on to Miro to register for account, and while I quickly go over a few example usage. So what we're seeing here is a Miro example on a whole campus of faculty, staff, and students collectively using Miro to create a virtual tour, different from the kind of traditionally designed map that's only designed by a group of graphic designers. This kind of collective virtual tour of the campus, this creative process is collectively designed by everyone who use the physical campus space. It's a process without beginning or end. Students can always go back to the Miro board to add what they feel is an important aspect of their campus. So yeah, it's an ongoing design process that's not owned by a single voice without beginning or end, center or edge. The next example is a classroom example that rethink the idea of teaching, the idea of classroom teaching, not as a fixed set of sequential instructions, but a society of creative agents that's making meaningful connections from multiple levels using kind of multiple symbols and languages. The next example is a kind of creative arts example called monster making. It takes a modular network approach. It starts from very small building blocks such as eyes and a mouth, and builds up like slightly bigger modules like individual monsters, and then the monsters join together onto the bottom board to create a collective meta narrative. It's a way to think about allowing a coherent overall meta narrative to emerge without compromising the individual voices, because the individual participant can design their own monsters and all the monsters can join on a collective board below. Yeah, so the last example is an example I personally use to kind of complement my participatory research process. So I'm currently working on a participatory research project called the Collective Worlding. For the past 3 years, I have been asking general museum audiences if they can create a world, what would their world look like? What would be the rules and how would the member interact? What would change and what would stay the same? And my research process actually starts with a Miro board where I put a question in the center, and using the mind map function on the Miro board, all kinds of people from different backgrounds can give their input on what they think is the world in their mind using images, text, emojis, poem, like multitudes of languages that they feel the most comfortable to brainstorm on that question. So without further ado, I'd like to start our first collaborative making experiment. It's a collective poetry session. It's very intuitive. I will now post the board link.
I did that.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Yes, I think the presenter mode doesn't allow me to click on the hyperlink. Yeah, so that link should take everyone into a collective Miro board like this. And the steps to join this collaborative making poetry session is quite simple. The rules is that we will start with a quote by a character called Yoda from the Star Wars that says, "Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering." And the idea is that we're going to collectively use that as a loose structure to populate our collective poem together. So the way to contribute is you can feel free to double click on any of the links and using the last word of the previous contributor as the starting word of your phrase, and type leads to and finish off the verse with a word that you contribute. And the next participant would come in, repeat the last word of the previous poet, and then say leads to, and then generate a new word contributed by the new author. So there are multiple threads to contribute. All you need to do is to double click on the text and start editing. So as soon as the previous poet finish their verse, you can then generate new content based on their content. Yeah, so I see that a lot of people have already jumped in, and there is also a possibility to generate our own original poetry path. If you would like to generate a new poetry path instead of relying on the existing structure, you can hover over to the vertical menu bar on the left, click on this letter T called text, click anywhere on the board, which will allow you to actually start a new text box. And I can say maybe anger leads to heart. And after that, you can try to use hover over to the same vertical menu bar on the left, click on the arrow sign, and hover over to the starting verse and link it to the new verse here. You don't necessarily need to do this, but you can feel free to use this also as an opportunity to play with adding new words.
Zhenzhen, just a quick question. Some attendees have difficulties signing in. Do they need the password?
Oh yes, the password is Teachers College, lowercase, all in one word. Yeah, sorry, it's on the PowerPoint slide. Yeah, but yeah, all Teachers College, lowercase, all in one word.
And for those of you who are new to Miro, you see the platform, you see on the left side, you see the menu items, the toolbar, so to speak. And then on the very bottom right, you see the percentage, which is essentially, you can zoom in or out to kind of navigate a little bit around. So that's interesting or to know about the interface. Also, when you are in the toolbar to the left, you see these, you can easily create sticky notes, as some of you already are doing. And then they are placed on the board, and you can use the text tool, and you can even draw with the pencil tool. So that's kind of an interface. It's good to know about that. Zhenzhen, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to explain for this first experiment. Yeah, I see someone has already figured out how to add comments. Yeah, it's kind of just this loose structure for us to experiment with and kind of getting familiar with the platform.
And one of the beautiful, I think, one of the beauties of this platform is that you see everybody. So you can actually, you could make the cursors of participants in you could hide them, but I think it's one of the beautiful things to see everybody kind of being busy and getting busy on working on their own ideas, and that makes it really a collaborative platform.
Let me try to repost the board one more time for people who are still looking to join the poetry session. Yeah, I see that some people have already figured out how to add emojis. So for those of you who would like to try to add emoji, you can try to click on the app icon, which is the last icon on the left vertical menu bar, which allows you to add like a different set of like kind of pre-canned structure onto the board. So Jane, can you try to click directly on the Miro board link that's linked above your comment? That should take you to the board directly. Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening. You should be able to directly go to this board.
Maybe it works with the next link, and which brings us to another kind of
okay,
collaborative making session that Zhenzhen prepared.
Oh yeah, maybe we can also try the next experiment together as well. So yeah, for this one, it's also the idea is quite intuitive. We're going to be drawing circles together, initially following some loosely set rules of collaboration. And as we progress from the left end to the right end of the screen, we can also feel free to propose our own drawing rules. And hopefully the rest of us feel compelled to humor the newly added rules as we move on to the right-hand side. So for this board, it's the same way to navigate. Instead of text, we will be focusing on drawing shapes. And the way to contribute to this board is to go to the fourth tool on the left-hand vertical menu bar, click on it and hover over to the square, and then start drawing squares. And when you click on the square, there are once you finish drawing the square, there are two buttons on top of the square that would allow you to define it with a fill color as well as a border color. And if you go to the shape icon and then click on the add button at the bottom of the fill color icon, you can also use the color selection bar below, as well as the cursor to pick a self-defined color palette that's not one of the predefined color palette. Yeah, so feel free to follow with the initial prompts to start drawing. And as you progress towards the right-hand side of the board, you might even want to double click on the text and then try to propose your own drawing rules, and other people can maybe try to collaborate based on the rules that you design. Great. I guess that's all I have prepared. The last thing I would like to bring to all of our attention is a resource called Miroverse. Essentially, it's a community featured gallery that has a very wide collection with different kind of purpose and scenarios of board that's being designed and submitted by like users like you and I. Instead of making your own board completely from scratch, what I sometimes do is to go to Miroverse and search based on different content and kind of copy and paste someone else's board and modify it with my own purpose. So maybe I can, yeah, so this is the Miroverse link.
Thank you very much, Zhenzhen. We have a few minutes to take some of your questions and that you may have. Please share your questions with us through the Q&A. We have a moderator in the back for those questions who may want to bring them up with us if there are questions. And we'll wait a little bit, and I also encourage Chloe or Alex to maybe they have some comments on this in relation to their own work or the tools that they were suggesting.
I totally want to use Miro now. I'm like completely sold. So thank you for that. I'm going to experiment with it. I think it's really fun, especially to see everyone working at the same time. So very grateful to have been introduced to that.
Great, thank you, Chloe. I think I see a question coming in. How would you use these tools for bilingual education and for elementary school students? So any one of you?
Yeah, I would be happy to begin to address that. So in addition to being a student and facilitating the arts exchange, I'm also an ESOL teacher coordinator. So I work directly with ESOL populations through Community Impact, which is an organization at Columbia University, which provides free ESOL classes to immigrants. But I would just use it as a tool, just like you would in any other instance. These are very flexible tools, so they're not specifically for any subject. But you have the ability to, I would say, incorporate the culture. So this is where I would incorporate cultural responsive teaching by just, providing a prompt to your students. I'm not sure which level you teach, but you can start off by asking a question that incorporates their own cultural background, and then having them populate, the sticky notes on Miro or something like that, just as a collaborative, an opportunity to share collaboratively.
Thank you, Alex, for that. We in preparation of this session today, we also talked about cultural responsiveness, cultural responsive teaching or pedagogy, and one of the things that came up, and I think it was you who shared that, was it provides a third space. So can you say a little more about that for everybody?
Sure. Yeah, so the third space is a topic that definitely needs some time to talk about fully, but it's just this idea of a time, a designated time during class that is for unstructured conversation, that is for students' opinions and experiences to be able to be voiced. And this can be as easy as allocating the last 10 minutes of your class time to saying, okay, now what do you want to talk about? How do you have any questions? This could be things related to the curriculum or the lesson, or this could be things not related. And this just provides an open space for students to feel okay, there's no more pressure. I don't have to say, what if I say the wrong thing, during class, I could be wrong, but during the third space environment, it's there aren't any right or wrong answers. And through that, facilitation, you can then connect back the student's experience to the lesson.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Chloe, you are nodding in agreement.
Yeah, and it was making me think about even my daughter's experience in kindergarten. They have this kind of unstructured time at the beginning of the morning where it's like, what do you want to say? And I think that's so important in realizing that we're all human first before we're student or instructor. And to build a community, you need that type of dialogue with each other and that comfort level. So I absolutely, agree with what Alex said.
I thank you. I thank you very much. Any additional comment from the panel? Otherwise, I would close the session. We're at the end of our time. I thank you very much for being on the panel. I thank the attendees for being with us and for all the good and wonderful comments and questions you had. I know that CPS will follow up with the materials on the website and reach out to the registrants in shortly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.